Jerry and Charlie riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your mustangs, now get up out your seats. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Chase Station.
Today is Friday, February 7th. Spring training is right around the corner. Some Mets are already down in Port St. Lucie, and they have a new or old teammate on the way because Pete Alonso has finally ended the conversation with the New York Mets and re-signed on a 2-year, $54 million deal, 1 year for $30 million, and then an opt-out. So who knows? We might be in this exact same position exactly at this point a year from now, but it doesn't matter because for the 2025 Mets, their first baseman is Mr. Pete Alonso. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jack, aka Jolly. Joining me is Jerry Blevins, who's weathering the storm in a sick household, putting on a show regardless. Jerry, how you doing?
I'm lovely, man. Yeah, it's Friday because I couldn't record yesterday. I left for our Bourbon Field of Dreams, drinkfieldofdreams.com if you want to check it out. But I was at a conference in Denver, and while I'm in flight, I get a text from my wife saying that my oldest son, Ellis, has the flu. Um, and I was like, shoo, I just missed that. She got it, and then my younger son seems to be okay. He was a couple of weeks ago. But I come home late Thursday night. I'm driving, and Jolly's like, "Can you record tomorrow?" I'm like, "What?" So I was listening to something else, realized that Pete signed. And that's why we're here. Yesterday, I was playing full dad duty on two kids that couldn't go to school, keeping the other kids, free from germs. And now I have some time here, so I think we let it sink in a little bit. And the my first impression of the Pete signing is thank goodness for the New York Mets. Apart from we'll dive into the sentimental value and all that, but just for this year's team, they needed him. They needed him more than a lot of us were willing to admit. This lineup is so much better with him slotted, right in the heart of it. It takes so much pressure off of so many guys. Vientos doesn't have to be a cleanup hitter, that style. Nimmo doesn't have to bat, fourth or whatever the key may be where he was. But this makes this year's team so much better.
First off, I want to apologize because when I first texted you, you called me and I didn't answer. So I
You
can't
did.
imagine what those seven
I
minutes
was on
must
the
have been
road and I
like.
don't like to text and drive, so
Because you're a responsible adult, so I appreciate that, but I
it
do
was
apologize.
also in the middle of a ice storm, so that was fun.
Some things are worth it, like Pete Alonso. Yeah, it's exactly what you said. The valuation of Pete Alonso from the New York Mets, I think, was a lot higher than 29 other teams, and that's exactly why we found ourselves in this debacle of the sentimental value, which we'll get into later, but also just needing something around Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor for this year. The Mets have guys in the pipeline that they believe in. They believe in Ryan Clifford, who is a first baseman. They have internal options that they believe can provide offense to this team, but none of those guys are quite ready yet. None of those guys have quite the experience yet for the Mets to completely walk away from someone who they know what his capabilities are. They know that Pete Alonso is a 30 home run bat. They know that he can hit in the middle of the lineup. They know that he can play with the pressure of New York, and they know that he loves being a Met. So those four factors were incredibly important, and I think that when you weigh those things, it was always going to be Pete Alonso and the Mets. And I think, you had to spin it and rationalize the possibility of him leaving. But you're absolutely right that the Mets needed Pete Alonso, especially for this year, especially when all those other options flew off the board and it really became Pete Alonso, or you're going to have to solve your first baseman problem internally. So it's a very happy reunion, I think, at least for one side. We'll talk about Pete Alonso's side of things after. But yeah, when you look at this lineup, Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Mark Vientos is how Fangraphs has it on roster resource. That is a championship caliber top of the lineup, in my opinion. We don't fully know what Mark Vientos is yet, in a good way and maybe a bad way, but that top five, you can trust day in and day out to produce offensively. And I really do think Pete Alonso in the middle of it is the key.
I agree. I think that he's the linchpin here, the the piece that drives in runs, that hits home runs, because Juan Soto hit 40 last year, but he's not necessarily throughout his career been a 40 home run guy. It's his first time being on the home run leaderboard in that sense. He's an on base guy and a doubles machine and a walk. The guy is a producer of runs, and to not have an established guy hitting behind him that's a masher like Pete Alonso was a little bit worrisome for this year's team. And they could have figured it out. Vientos could be the guy that we saw last year and take an even bigger step forward. But you needed that from him. This takes that pressure off, and it just makes it a competitive lineup, a truly competitive lineup for, even the Dodgers, the big bad Dodgers that everybody's talking about. It's a championship caliber team with Pete Alonso, and I'm not sure it was without.
Yeah, there were serious questions with the pitching staff, and there were serious questions with the bullpen, and there were also questions with the lineup on this team. And now, in my opinion, the lineup feels very comfortable to me now. I feel like I can put a lot of trust into the lineup with Pete Alonso in the middle of it. From Alonso's perspective, it's not what he was expecting, and I'm sure that it was a tough pill to swallow. I am happy that Steve Cohen went to Tampa Bay and like met with him and faced him face to face alongside David Stearns to get the deal done. It wasn't over the phone. It wasn't impartial because I'm sure there is a little bit of rebuilding that this relationship might need this year. But for Pete, if he were to get into a situation where he needs to have a good year to reset his value and reset his market going into the next year, joining the Mets and hitting behind Juan Soto, I think is the best possible thing he could have done. There was a Blue Jays whisper. I'm sure that lineup would have been good, but I think this is the best situation for him. All of us know, and this is the biggest thing for me. I'm going to open him with this. All of us know that the issue with Pete Alonso last year was that he wasn't able to get the big hit and the big moment, aside from the biggest moment of the year. I
Yeah,
fully recognize that. He came through and it mattered most. The runners in scoring position numbers. From his rookie year to 2023, Pete had a 945 OPS with runners in scoring position. That's elite.
incredible. That's
Really,
elite.
really good. And that's why you have seasons where Pete Alonso brought in 120 runs. 131 in 2022, 118 in 2023. Last year, 88 RBIs, a significant step down. That OPS with runners in scoring position was 762. Well, you know what? When you hit behind a guy who has a career 400 on base percentage, you're going to get a lot of opportunities with runners in scoring position because it's MVP runner up, MVP 3, Pete Alonso. So if he wanted a year to prove that 2024 was an outlier and he is the guy that he was for those previous 5 years, this is the perfect situation to do it in. So I'm excited for Pete Alonso because I do fully believe that at age 30, he might be in for a career year, at least from a counting numbers standpoint. And you know what? If he does that, great, because one, he'll get what he thinks he deserves, and two, that means the Mets got the absolute most out of Pete Alonso. So at the end of the day, this is a good partnership when you zoom out outside of the smaller contract, the smaller number, the negotiations that went on endlessly. This is a good situation for Pete Alonso.
Yeah, I agree. I think there were other homes elsewhere, friendlier ballparks. My dark horse was Minnesota for Pete Alonso to land.
Mm,
They're in need of some more lineup help, and that AL Central is wide open for somebody to take it. And the Twins have done nothing.
nothing.
Yeah,
Harrison Bader.
yeah, that's true. But again, he's not Pete Alonso. They
Right.
haven't done enough for them to separate themselves from the mishmash that is the AL Central.
Oh,
I could have
Jerry, do you think that they got Harrison Bader to try and lure Pete Alonso because they're
their
college
boys.
buddies? Oh my God,
Yeah,
I
it
didn't
could
think of
be
that till just now.
the allure of Pete. But apart from that, Pete not getting the market that he feels he deserves, and I understand. I love Pete Alonso as a player, a guy that puts in 160 games a year at first base and DH, that hits 35, 34 plus home runs every season. You know, I think he's more valuable than teams were putting out there. And I was super surprised that when the Mets weren't willing to bulk up their offer early in the offseason, that another team didn't go out and say, you know what, I want a 40 home run guy. We can do some things this year, take advantage of Pete not going back to the Mets and get a bopper for a year or two and do some real damage this season. Um, and it didn't happen. And thankfully for the Mets, this should be the new home run king for the entire franchise. This year, he should take that number over from Darryl Strawberry. What is he, 26 away?
He needs 27 this year to pass him.
27 to become the Mets all-time home run leader. Should be done hopefully by late July, that kind of thing. But from a franchise perspective, from my perspective, I want Pete to be a forever Met. I want him
Mm.
to only don one uniform. But this will reset. He'll go out, hopefully have a tremendous year, and then let's see what the market looks like from there for him. But again, the Mets needed him. He didn't need the Mets, but he definitely needed a landing spot like this. And it's a perfect fit. The team needed another spot in the lineup, and he needed a team to fit that can help him produce runs. And the Mets, top of their lineup, is one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I mean, speaking sentimentally, the home run thing, I tried to pretend that I didn't care about, but like I so wanted Pete Alonso to be the guy. Like he really does at this point define an era of Mets baseball for me. Like you think of late 2010s, early 2020s, you think of Pete Alonso, before Francisco Lindor comes along. He's 27 away. You mentioned he might do it by late July. I believe that's when David Wright gets his number retired. So there's a chance you can get a little storybook there and get Pete Alonso doing it on that day. That'd be really special. But at somewhere in that area, you feel like he's going to break it. Um, and it would have sucked. Like, it would have sucked to see him come so close and have this terrific moment and then just leave right after, where it feels like the story's not quite finished yet. And now we get to see another chapter, if you will. But I'm sure that he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder this year. I'm sure that there's going to be a little bit of walking on eggshells for a little bit between maybe him and ownership. But I do think that Steve Cohen and the Cohen family's relationship with players is strong enough that this is something they'll be able to overcome. And if Pete turns in this fantastic year, I think the likelihood of him coming back is even stronger next year if he does show up and really like proves himself, I guess, in a way. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was an exhausting saga. I'm really happy it's over. I was really worried it was going to bleed into spring training and not only affect Pete but affect the team. And I'm glad that we're avoiding all that, at the last possible second. But this is the kind of thing that you have to partially accept when you become a Boris client of. I know a lot of people were blaming Scott Boris, and you absolutely can because this is how he's done business, and it's annoying and to an extent ruthless. But when Pete Alonso hired him, I think he knew that the goal was to beat the number that he was offered and declined. And it became clear quickly that they weren't going to come close to that. But they kind of had to stand by their guns, or else their entire platform falls apart beneath them. And I think they made some mistakes along the way, like offering the Mets an exclusive deal that they weren't offering other teams. I feel like that kind of hurt their leverage. Um, but at the end of the day, Pete Alonso's a Met. We can all stop talking about Scott Boras and we can focus on baseball and this lineup, which has become very potent.
Agreed. The signing of Pete is huge for the Mets in many facets, but most importantly for me, is this year's team is the 2025 iteration of the New York Mets is a lot stronger with Pete Alonso. Um, and he's got to go out and prove his worth and just do what he does. The Mets just need him to be Pete Alonso. Pete needs him to be Pete Alonso, and we'll hit reset at the end of the season. But for now, he gets to don the pinstripes again, gets to be in the same locker room that he's known his whole career. Um, some familiarity there really helps, and to be a hired gun and to go into a new place is a tough ask. To be a hired gun and to go back to where you started is a lot easier transition for Pete Alonso. There will be some questions. The media is going to be on him about the market, what happened, But Steve Cohen and the visit to Tampa to come talk to him and be like, hey, we really do want you. We've said that the whole time. The process was exhausting, but bottom line is we want and need you. And I think it would be a happy marriage, and it is again for one more season at
So let
least.
me ask you this, and you might not have an exact like numbers in mind or anything like that, but what, in your opinion, would make 2025 a successful season for Pete Alonso? What do you think it would take for him to do what he does and then say, okay, I'm going to opt out and try this again?
I think he just needs to revert back to the Pete Alonso from 2023, the 40 homer, 100 RBI guy. Get that batting average up a little bit and just hit 40. 40 is the number for me for a guy that doesn't play good defense, for a non-base stealer in this era of baseball. He needs to post up every day and he needs to hit 40 and drive in, triple digits. And I think that's a should be for him because without good defense, you have to have other aspects of your game. And he's a power guy, a throwback, and he needs to hit 40.
Yeah, I think that kind of nails it because he's hit 40 now in half of his seasons, but he didn't do it last year. But the 2 years prior, 40 and 131, 46 and 118. With 2023, you can say a lot of that was garbage time, but numbers are numbers, and that's what he did. He came close to 50, which, in all honesty, I didn't think he would ever do again. I thought that was kind of just a juiced ball thing, but no, he got, it was four away with missing 8 games. Who knows what he could have done in those 8 games? Yeah, if Pete hits 40 and he gets that OPS back above 800, he gets to 100 RBIs, and honestly just comes through in the situations that we're used to him coming through in. Like, I feel like the whole narrative of Pete Alonso in clutch situations got totally rewritten where, like, you go back to even just 2023. I remember the Tampa Bay walk-off. I remember the grand slam he hit against Cleveland. In 22, he had the walk-off against St. Louis. Like he's come through in clutch situations plenty of times in his career. In fact, like used to be the bat I wanted up the most in those situations. And I think last year seriously hurt that reputation, but it is just one year. Guys have bad years all the time. And it's crazy that in our mind it's a bad year because our standard for Pete Alonso is so high. Like he still had the exact same OPS plus from 23 to 24. I said it on the live stream that I did on Shea Station when it first happened, but I'm happy that I can start to talk about these things positively again. Like before he signed, I would have to say it kind of like, yeah, he did play 162 games. That is valuable, but and now I get to say Pete Alonso played every game of the regular season last year, and we remember how important those games were down the stretch. It was important to have him out there every single day. He hit 30 home runs for the fifth straight regular season in his career, full season. He still has not ever not done that. You can lock him in for 30. Like these are things that we were spinning as we can live without, and now we're spinning them as we could not have lived without this. We just were pretending that we could. So it's
Looking
just,
for some magic if you didn't
yeah,
sign back.
it's
Yeah.
like, we had conversations about Brett Beatty and what role will Acuna play, and we can still have those conversations, but they get a lot
Those are
easier.
even more interesting now because there's
Right.
less room out there.
It's
But the
almost
truth is,
like, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, Pete last year, it was weird for someone that watches every game, as you can attest to, is that he just looked lost at the plate for
Yeah.
longer stretches. He looked overmatched by high-end leverage pitchers, especially bullpen guys coming in those situations where he normally looked comfortable. And even though you don't come through a lot because hitting is the hardest thing to do in professional sports, he didn't look lost. You're not going to come through all the time, but he looked like he was never going to come through a lot of those times. Um, so I'm happy to have him back. I want to see him regress to the mean of what Pete Alonso is, which is better than what he did last year. And he still had those magical moments, that playoff runs. The Devin Williams home run will live on in Mets lore forever. I mean, one of the most clutch hits in the history of baseball. Just a huge moment, and to have him back is great.
Yeah, that's a clip we're gonna be watching for a long time. I heard my screams on someone who animated us
That's
yesterday,
amazing.
which was crazy. Like
That
I
was
just
so cool.
let me put animating sports, I believe was his handle. We shared it on Twitter and Instagram if you haven't seen it already. It's me and Jerry around a fireplace, like we always do, in our bathrobes, which are blue and orange, because that's something we're always doing. And he just animated like pieces of our podcast and stitched together conversations. Incredibly clever and really cool.
Super.
Made me smile big time.
That was cool.
Um, but yeah, just to put some numbers to the narrative that you painted there, Pete Alonso, his OPS within 4 runs or less last year, all these numbers are below 770, which is a fine number, but it's not the number you're accustomed to with Pete Alonso. The number you're more accustomed to is an OPS more like 981, which were his numbers with a margin of 4 runs or greater. So Pete did most of his damage. He had 10 of his home runs when the game was basically out of reach. And that's something that he needs to turn around this year. And that's not something you can like get in a lab and fix. It just comes down to reps and getting in those situations and getting the monkey off your back, which I think he can fully do with a clean slate in 2025 and new talent around him and all that good stuff. So I mean, the Mets just absolutely crushed this offseason. I don't think there's any two ways about it. From the beginning of the offseason, coming out hot and getting the things they need, winning the Juan Soto sweepstakes, bringing back Benaya. They went dormant for like a month when asking prices were too high and they felt that they had to pivot to a plan B and all this stuff. But I just think they got great value of all the dudes they brought in. They brought back guys that I think were necessary in bringing back. They're still missing one, and that's Jose Iglesias. We need to find a way. We'll figure it out. But bringing back Winker, a guy that badly wanted to be a New York Met, said so outwardly, and could not wipe the smile off his face that amazing day. Bringing back Sean Manaea, who created such an emotional connection with the fan base and transformed into the best version of himself under our guys, and bringing back Ryan Stanek, a dude who stepped up in the most important spots in the playoffs and came back on a relatively team friendly 1 year deal, knowing his career resume. I just think that the Mets did everything right this offseason. They didn't overplay their hand, they didn't bid against themselves, and they highlighted areas of the team that desperately needed improving while also leaving open areas for younger guys to prove themselves. Like in the infield, honestly, like there's a spot here to compete for at second base with McNeil and Acuna, and maybe Beatty moves over somewhere because they were trying him out there. But they're leaving competition for the young guys open. They're leaving roster spots open for experimentation, like Clay Holmes, and then they're bringing back the big guns that they needed, like Pete Alonso. So I'm really excited to watch this team play, man. I can't wait.
I am excited as well. I still think they needed one of the big starting pitchers, whether it be Burns, Freed, um, Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, that kind of top end. I still think
Crochet
they're a
would
little
have been
short
nice.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do like every move. They have a solid team. The roster is complete now. And they've still got some wiggle room, as you said, for some young guys to shine. Um, and make that move. I don't think Jose Iglesias fits anymore
Brings a tear to
because
my
I
eye.
think I know he was excellent for the Mets, but I think he'll find a home elsewhere. So
Yeah, that comes down to, I guess, what do they get out of Luis Angel Acuna? How much do they believe? What do they want his role to be? Um, One thing I will say, Jerry, and this is a little random segue, but I do need to mention it before I forget it. So every year we do our over-unders for the season. I don't know if you remember that episode. We did it last year. I don't even have the graphic pulled up of what we voted on. One person came up to me at Amazing Day, and I forget her name, and I regret it deeply. And she said, "I need you to put Jerry on blast on your next show." And I said, "Why?" Like he's a wonderful man. Why would I do that? And she goes, "When you guys did your over under episode, Jerry confidently said under on one complete game for the 2024 season. He was like, no one's gonna do it. No one does it anymore. Mets haven't had one forever. Luis Severino did it. We totally forgot to highlight it. So she
that's
brought that
true.
to my
I'll wear
attention.
that. I'll wear that.
I mean, you being the pitcher, in retrospect, crazy decision by you. Gotta
I
believe.
still stand by it. There were lots of data pointing in that direction,
That's
and
fair.
the fact that one complete game was such a moment in the season points to the era of starting pitching. But yeah, I was wrong. I can admit when I'm wrong.
That's honestly a really good point of like whenever I see the 2024 Mets highlights they always show the Severino shutout, and it's great. Like it's awesome.
It
It's a great
is. It
moment
was
in the
a
season.
huge moment.
But yeah, like that's how rare these things have become. That it's like a full on like season highlight. Um,
I'll
but
probably take
yeah,
the under this year as well.
you mentioned the pitching staff a little bit. It is. I mean, I want to believe in the experimentation of it with Sanger returning. Who knows what we get out of Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes as a starter. It would have been nice to get one of those big fish in retrospect. I think we were kind of riding the high of Juan Soto a little bit still when all those signings happened. But missing out on all those guys is tough. You mentioned the Diamondbacks. They were actually my sleeper team for Pete Alonso. I thought that
That would
because
have been
they
a good
operate
pick.
so quietly,
Mhm.
you never know what, like, we didn't know that they were going to get Burns and then they just got him. I thought they might move Naylor to DH and get Pete there. Um, but all in all, I think outside of that one starting pitcher, which could still happen, there's still guys on the market. I mean, let's just take a quick look at the names that are still available if the Mets really feel
Okay.
like getting crazy. Um, because I know Nick Pivetta is still out there as a starting pitcher. Obviously, Alex Bregman is still out there. I don't think the Mets are in play for that, but it's
Yeah,
worth
he's
mentioning
also
for sure.
got he's in a different situation where he's got multiple long-term offers on the
Yeah.
table. He's just waiting for the deal to sweeten up.
We have JD Martinez still out there who says he's going to become a professional pickleball player once his career ends. So good for JD. I think
All
he
right,
already signed
JD.
like a contract and everything, which is pretty official. Our guy Quintana still out there in the free agent market as well. I hope he finds a home because he really dealt towards the end of the
Where's
season.
Walker Bueller? Did he sign?
He signed with the Boston Red Sox on like a
Oh,
really
that's
good
right. Yep,
deal.
that's a
It's
good
like
fit. I
a
like that.
1 year for 20 or 1 year
Like a
for
do
10,
right.
something
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, I think this was the last big fish that wasn't Alex Bregman, and the Mets had to get it done, and they did. And this lineup just looks so much better because of
Yeah,
it.
that's the bottom line. This is now a truly competitive team. Pete Alonso back with the Mets. It's huge for so many different reasons. Tugs at the heartstrings in good ways. But it makes this season so much better. It takes a lot of pressure off the lineup. We haven't even mentioned Francisco Alvarez at all this
Well,
year,
I
and
was
I
going to ask you
still
next question of like who in the bottom half is the most
he
important
it's
for you?
him. It's
Yeah.
Alvarez because he has the most potential, and he can do what Mark Vientos did last year. Um, he can take that throne and put up an impressive offensive season and make this a complete top to bottom lineup with thump everywhere. He's to me he's the key, obviously of the bottom of the lineup that can really do some stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked him, referring to that question, because I do think he's an obvious candidate of like, we know this guy can hit 30 home runs. We saw the
Hmm.
potential in 23. We saw it at the end of last year, too. For me, it's Jeff McNeil, too. I think that's a worthy discussion because I think this is the pivot point of his career where, like, in my mind, Jeff McNeil either becomes a very expensive bench piece or he returns to what we thought he was. And we saw that in the second half of last year, where he had a 923 OPS in 41 games. People forget that in July and August, for a decent stretch, he was the best hitter in the lineup. No hyperbole. Before Lindor really went on that tear, and this was when JD was kind of cooling down and Vientos was establishing himself. There was a 2 month stretch where McNeil had an 850 OPS or better in back-to-back months, and he was hitting home runs again. Um, it was my favorite in-season baseball thing that happens every year, where some guy just says, "Yeah, my hitting coach told me to start swinging harder, and now everything's working." It's like, well, how hard could being a hitting coach be? It's a lot harder. But yeah, I mean, I think if we get one of or both in a perfect world of these guys stepping in and returning to their true form. Now you're looking at a former batting title winner hitting eighth. You're looking at a catcher who can hit 30 home runs batting seventh. You have your DH platoon of Winker and Marte sixth, and then you have five all-star MVP caliber bats at the top of the lineup. You don't even got to worry about Jose Siri and whatever antics he gets down in the nine hole there. It just feels so much more complete. Whereas without Pete Alonso, Vientos is moving to first. He's losing all the progress he made at third base. You're giving the keys to Brett Beatty again with no real competition again. Maybe you're asking too much of Luis Angel Acuna. Now everyone can kind of ease in and you can expect a breakout from one of these guys and feel comfortable in that expectation. It just makes the offense so much more exciting having that known quantity at first base.
Yeah, I agree. McNeil's going to be valuable for as long as his defense holds up and he can play multiple positions at such a high caliber. he's going to be better than his offensive numbers. But what separated him was his bat to ball skills that kind of lost the way for a while. And for him to be able to figure that out again um, towards the end of the season, kind of turn that around, I think is huge. And you're right, he could be an absolute key piece of this offense.
So I think that probably does it for like my thoughts on the situation.
I want to shout out one more name
Sure.
for competition, that a guy that we got a very small glimpse of and then he got hurt. Ronnie Mauricio, man.
Mm.
You know that he's often been the forgotten guy. Looked like he was coming into his own a little bit, and you know, obviously the knee injury will push that back. But I really like him as a ball player. If something doesn't happen with the names that you've already mentioned for the healthy guys, I could see Ronnie Mauricio coming back.
Yeah, Mauricio's so interesting to me. I mean, I saw a lot of Mets fans do their trade packages for, guys like Crochet and Arenado and those guys. And a lot of the time I saw the name Ronnie Mauricio included in those. And it always made me think of two things. One, I don't think anyone's trading for a 24-year-old rookie coming off an ACL injury. I don't think that's happening. I think Mauricio, if he does break out, it'll be under a Mets uniform. And two, he's got the build that gets you excited. He's got that O'Neal Cruz, Ellie De La Cruz type build where he's long, lanky, athletic, can play multiple positions and really like hit the crap out of the ball when he gets a hold of one. He's just playing with a little bit of the odds against him, I think. Coming off
Yeah,
the
he's
injury.
probably not going to be healthy to start spring.
Right.
He's got some names and people that made an impact last year. But I really like what he is as a ball player. He's still 23, I think. He's going
Yeah.
to be 24 this year sometime. Um, he's a good piece to have. And you're right, the Mets aren't going to trade him when his value is at its lowest.
Right. And that was the conversation with McNeil too, of like the Mets aren't going to try and trade this contract now. It doesn't make any sense. But with Mauricio, like I'll say the same thing that, applies to Vientos a little bit. No one penciled in Vientos for 30 home runs last year. No one penciled him in to be basically at points the second most important hitter in the lineup behind Lindor. And he started the year in AAA. Like and if I had to take a bet right now, I'm going to say Ronnie Mauricio starts the year in AAA or
For
starts the year
sure.
on the injured list and then goes to AAA. But injuries happen, guys slump, guys
They'll
underperform,
be needed.
opportunities present themselves, and it's just about seizing that opportunity. And when he came up, I know the numbers don't look pretty towards the end, but when Mauricio first came up in 2023, that first week, he lit the league on fire. In fact, let's do a quick little butter knife here.
Yeah, I just remember line drives everywhere.
First 16 games that he played, he hit 300 and he slugged 500. So like that'll play, at
That'll
second base,
play.
shortstop, or third base, wherever you end up.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah. So the Mets have depth. They have options. They got their major league guys set in stone. And that infield, I don't want to say I mean, this like Trev put it really well on an episode of Talking Baseball of they were talking about the Gavin Lux trade, I think. And Jake was asking him, like, why would you trade Gavin Lux? You have this talented player. Like, do the Dodgers feel like they just need to, once they have too much talent, they just have to trade it away and get something else? And Trev was like, well, we used to not call that, an overcrowding of talent. We used to just call that depth. And that's what the Mets, I think, are trying to build. They're building real depth that when a guy gets his opportunity, you're not like, oh shit, we got to play this guy for 10 games. It's like, okay, now Ronnie Mauricio gets 10 games. Let's see what he's got. You know what I mean? So that's
100%.
exciting too. That's a product of building a good organization from the bottom up. And I mentioned at the top, but like they have prospects that they're excited about, and Ryan Clifford and Drew Gilbert and these guys in the pipeline, Jet Williams. But a big reason to protect these guys is to not rush them. So you have to get these right people in place. And one of those right pieces was obviously Pete Alonso, because the trickle down effect of that is Viento staying at third, creating one less infield spot, creating one less roster spot, so guys can get their time to develop and prove that they have earned their opportunity when the time comes.
That's a fact, my man. I was trying to look at who are the names in the 23 season that proves that the depth of this program now.
Oh, read
Like
me some names.
yeah, I'm looking at names. You have
DJ
guys like
Stewart's the big one.
yeah, DJ Stewart, Darren Ruff getting a slice. Travis Jankowski had a good at Patrick Mazika,
Patrick Mazika.
Tyler Naquin, Nick Plummer, Michael
Yeah.
Perez,
Rafael
Terrence Gore.
Ortega got 47 games. I mean, this was
Yeah, I
This
mean, you just had guys come up that you were like, who? What?
That's an
No
interesting thing to think
expectation.
about with that team of like if the Mets imploded this year like they did in 23 and they sold off everyone, the guys playing in the second half would be much more exciting now than the guys 2 years
Exactly.
ago.
Real prospects, guys
Yeah,
with some real talent, just a different, I mean, from a couple of years ago, now we're looking at a completely different program. And the fact that the franchise has turned the corner is a huge nod to what Steve Cohen wanted when he bought the team, what he knew he was getting in David Stearns, and David Stearns' ability to create depth. Just a fun time to be a Mets fan.
very, very fun time to be a Mets fan. Counting down the days, Jerry. When
Yes,
do
sir.
pitchers
I
and
got to
catchers
book my
report?
flights down
I was
to
gonna
spring
say
training here.
you're on work duty soon.
I do. I have to work here. I have
Hell
two
yeah.
weeks. I got to go down.
I'm excited for you, brother. I think
Get
I
to work
might.
on this tan. I'm so pale.
I was gonna say, yeah, that Ohio sun really isn't doing any wonders for
No,
you right
it's
now.
it's it's not coming in enough for me.
I think I might be making my way down too, potentially. Don't really
Okay.
know the ins and outs of it yet. I know I'm going to Arizona in a couple weeks,
You
but I
going to the
want
Super Bowl with Jake?
to. No,
Is
no
he going
interest.
solo? Who's
I
he
might not
going with?
even. Can I be rude? I might not even watch the Super Bowl.
You'll watch halftime. Kendrick Lamar.
I'm gonna watch halftime. That's my guy. But I don't. Chiefs three-peat? Sure, why not?
Ugh.
Why not? That's fine.
It's
Oh
weird to
yeah,
root.
you don't like that. That makes
It's
sense.
weird to root for the Eagles. I like Mahomes. He's one of the
He's rooting
great.
for the Mets this year. I don't know if you saw that. The
I
clip of
didn't.
him talking about the Mets.
He can't do that. He's part owner of the Royals, isn't
Yeah,
he?
but his dad, Mets legend,
I
Pat
know.
Mahomes. I think he's
All
got
right.
his bias there.
Well,
Um,
Pete's back, so that's a good sign. That was a
that's a
good.
great
That was
sign.
a fun reason to get together and do another pod here.
Hell yeah. One right before the season really ramps up of like one more reflection of this offseason being just terrific through and through for the Mets.
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. All that stuff helps. Leave us a review if you're listening on a podcast app. Go to drinkfieldofdreams.com to support our
Boom.
guy, Jerry Blevins. I'll leave the link in the description. Check out some of the recent stuff on Shea Station. My panel with Sean Mania, David Peterson, Reed Garrett, and Christian Scott is up on the channel. It's 30
Love it.
minutes long. It's a really interesting conversation. Really well produced by the Mets, too. Their tech there is crazy.
Yeah, they do well.
They do all right for themselves, I'd say.
It's big
And
league, if you will.
yeah, I'd say it's the major leagues of
Yeah.
tech production. And enjoy the last couple weeks before baseball frenzy ensues, because once the Super Bowl is over, it's baseball season, baby.
Yes, sir. Let's go Mets.
LFGM. Let's go Mets. We'll see you soon. Till next time.
A little LFGM for Pete.
Jerry and Charlie, Shea Station. Jerry and Charlie, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time, where we'll be back.
Shea Station.